Putin has again put forward unrealistic ultimatums, and Trump will not dare to strike Iran. When will the US demonstrate its strength again, and how Putin is losing his influences everywhere? Let's talk right now. My name is Irina Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English. Yuri, hello. Glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to see you. Thank you for having me.
You know, I noticed one picture yesterday, and it seems to me that it describes all process around Donald Trump and his attention to very important deals and steps in this picture. Let's see this picture that Trump say in words about 2 weeks, and the message that Trump is too weak. But not all this about only 2 weeks and his position. Isn't Trump tired of being so weak himself? How do you think?
I think this is the way Donald Trump has lived his life. And I think that whenever we struggle to understand how anybody could do such things and expect them to turn out well, we just need to look at the number of bankruptcies that he himself or his companies had to declare. I think this is a man without a strategic vision, who's incapable of a strategic vision, who is capable of realizing that he doesn't have all the answers and hopes that within a unit of measurement of 2 weeks, he will have some answers and situation will progress without him doing anything, so that he could either claim credit for it or say he had nothing to do with it, depending on what happens. Which will, it's a very base, kind of a childish way of looking at things, but is perfectly understandable. And the consequences that come from it are, if it's a business, unpleasant, because there's people losing jobs and so on. But when we're speaking on the level of a nation, a state, United States, and the world, we're looking at a catastrophe of absolutely global scale, because when United States looks at its obligations and in relations with other countries in 2-week terms, as well as challenges that are faced domestically as well, because 2 weeks is a really convenient way of measuring whatever happens. And yes, it's 2 weeks because he's weak. It's something that he's been doing all his life. So we're not giving him any news to say, oh, another 2 weeks. Yes, another 2 weeks. But does it make him look weak? This is like an English language challenge here, because it's like a bitch and a beach, and those different words are just sometimes, but weak and a week. Yeah. Oh boy. But he's not going to say, Donald Trump is never going to mean that he is weak. He's going to always mean that he is strong, or at the very least that he's next to people who are strong. He wants to be next to strong men, to Putin, to Kim Jong-un, to Xi Jinping. We're like building a deck of cards out of all these strong men. There used to be a deck of cards like that, I think, in Iraq war, where all the Saddam Hussein's generals and everybody that needed to be caught, they were put on a deck of cards that was issued. So this could be like a deck of cards of authoritarians. Hopefully we won't have quite as many, but we're starting to build a deck. And Donald Trump feels that this is the company that he belongs with, because he wants to be with strong guys. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be with strong guys, but wants to be, because he's one of them. He's consistently demonstrating his weakness and also the weakness of the United States. Because if you have, a ship, a powerful ship, a mighty ship, and you have a captain who is determined to run it aground, it's going to be difficult, because if captain keeps installing people from, another ship that's trying to get this ship to go down in all sorts of different valuable positions, it's going to be difficult for a ship to make it out okay. This 3-hour tour could turn out to be a much longer journey. And I think the same can be said for war between Iran and Israel, and Russia and Ukraine. When people start war, they seem to think that in 3 days they're going to be in Kiev marching along. And then you have, Putin, who is not willing to admit that he's ever wrong, and Trump, who is afraid to take a stance. We're in a dangerous world in this situation, and it just means that democracy that makes that much more sense. Because democracies look for way out, democracies look to de-escalate, while we're looking at this hawk of a Putin and a chicken hawk of Trump.
But Pakistan nominates Trump for Nobel Peace Prize for mediation in conflict with India. You say about catastrophe involved, but Pakistan thinks that Donald Trump deserves this Nobel Prize. Trump himself said that he deserved 4 Nobel Prizes. For what?
I don't know, whatever they give him in physics, sciences, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what is the discipline in which he is rewarded or for which conflict that he helped, supposedly, he is rewarded. This is why it would make just as much sense to him if he's nominated by Pakistan or India or Zelensky or Putin, or he doesn't care. The point is that he wants to show that he is mighty while actually demonstrating to everyone that he is weak and easy to manipulate. And I think what India and Pakistan are doing there is obvious. But let's acknowledge that United States appears to have played, through Secretary of State, a positive role in helping that conflict de-escalate, because Secretary Rubio, as I recall, offered to participate in mediation efforts to de-escalate the situation, which is what India and Pakistan, I think, were looking for, because they do this every few years. Then they expect somebody like United States, there isn't anybody like United States really, to come in and say, we'll mediate, and therefore they can all settle down, and then they de-escalate, and they do this every few years. And the United States still has a person in that building, whatever, that is able, remembers how it's done. And that's apparently Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And of course, so he played his role that was expected of him. Fantastic. Yes, of course, this is all credit. All credit goes to the top, and all blame goes somewhere else. Now, for instance, you may recall a fancy parade that President threw for himself. But of course, the parade was lousy. And so it was not President who threw the parade. It was President who threw his Secretary of Defense under the bus and said that this was Secretary Hegseth's failure, among many, really. And it's now interesting to see how United States is making decisions, because we see that Secretary Hegseth and Director Gabbard have been supposedly frozen out of the decision-making process about Iran, because Hegseth, I think, failed the parade, and Gabbard keeps telling Kremlin talking points, because that's all she seems to know, and that is that Iran is no danger. Iran is years away from achieving their nuclear goals. So she doesn't fit into this mold, and she's been frozen out as well. So, even Kremlin assets have to match Trump's rhetoric. It's amazing. And so, because he already twice said that he doesn't care what she says about the, whatever, Iran, because he's got his own opinion. Remember, he is the stable genius. So a person with such a high opinion of himself, it's almost like, imagine a person in your life, ladies and gentlemen, viewers and listeners, of somebody who pays no attention to anybody else's opinion, is a kind of an ass, but that nobody seems to want to talk to and deal with. And so we just keep hoping that he's going to leave the party, and then it's going to be, fine. Or we can leave his party and everything's going to be fine. And then it turns out he's the president and he can't leave, and he won't leave. And even though this is supposed to be the last cadence and the last term, I would like to see him leave the White House before I will know that he is done. This is what happens when we deal with people who act irresponsibly in a cowardly way. Because when he's weak, it's a demonstration that we are weak, to show him that he is trying to string us along into World War III. And if we are too weak as people, as voters, as leaders, to tell Donald Trump, stop, then he's going to do what he's always done, do whatever he feels like, and preferably what Putin tells him to, because Putin's been his guiding star, clearly, for generations, I don't know, for decades. It is particularly interesting that the story that's blowing up right now in the Russian info space is about Sergio Gore, who is the person in charge of HR at the White House and was born in Malta or somewhere that he says is not Russia. Of course, Soviet Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was not technically Russia, so he was born technically in USSR, so he can say that he was not born in Russia. Really works well for rhetoric purposes, but that's a big scandal that's blowing up right now, because, Ukrainians and Russians could not believe that American president could be a Russian asset. But the more stories start to come out that say that people around him, people that are hiring people, putting them in different positions, are actually, have just direct Russian background, that seems to fit with the mold. And so whether he is weak, whether he is inept, whether he is corrupt, or whether he's a Russian asset, either way, this is all making the United States look absolutely terrible. And I feel that we as voters, those that voted against Donald Trump, have a little bit less to bear responsibility, because I feel like we did what we could. But the responsibility for what Trump does really lies on people that voted for Trump and people who didn't come to the vote.
But Yuri, we heard this week unusual for Trump statement that he doesn't need Putin as negotiator in Iran-Israel war. Maybe does Trump really no longer need Putin in this role, or it's only on worse?
Irina, I think what's important to acknowledge is the pattern of behavior and how Trump responds to different, the same stimuli, but from different countries. So when Iran is tagging him along, that's one thing. When Russia tags him along in negotiations, that's another thing. And it's amazing, because both times you have countries that go tagging Trump along works. Okay, so let's do it. And in one case, you only have Ukraine that is defending and fighting for its survival and sovereignty and integrity and democracy as a victim of this aggression, and therefore we have one response, and then the other case we have Israel, who is a much stronger country, clearly militarily, than Iran, and is able to, as I say, polish it off. But there's a more appropriate military term to say that Israel is destroying a huge list of targets, and is demilitarizing Iran almost in the way that Putin wishes he could have demilitarized Ukraine. But Israel was able to accomplish air superiority and air dominance over Tehran in 2 days, and that's something that Putin has not been able to do. But if you have this kind of aggression coming from Russia, and it's tagging along is coming from Russia, which is a strong country, then that's acceptable. But if you have tagging along from a weak country, which is how Iran is being perceived, then it doesn't really matter. Then I guess our patience is wearing thin, and we're just not impressed. On the other hand, if you have a president who's been termed taco in order so that other people could make money off of his pattern of behavior, then you can predictably presume that with sufficient pressure, he will back off from that threat as well. And that's where it's been really interesting to watch Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz duking it out in an interview that just blew up the English language space. Because there you have Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, who's saying, I'm the biggest fan of Israel. And Tucker Carlson representing the Kremlin mafia. And he is explaining, like, what do you mean you're for Israel? What about, our national interests, and how is this helping us? And why are you trying to drag us into wars? So all of a sudden, I have all my middle of political spectrum and to the left people going, wow, I had no idea that I agreed with Tucker Carlson so much. What's going on? And I have to explain that's because you just got stuck on Russian propaganda. Because if you're feeling that Tucker Carlson makes good points, you might as well watch Russian TV, because that's what he's saying. He's explaining to America why America sucks. For instance, saying things like, after Cold War was won, and what did America do to help Russia recover? What are you talking about? So all of those things that, and then really, as Tucker, I feel like crown piece, masterpiece to say that, look what America has accomplished since it defeated Soviet Union. Is this really worth it? Look at all this crime. Look at all these horrible things. And I'm going, how much further we would be if there was no Republican Party and Russia? Wow. Democracy would be thriving. That's what this is reminding me about. Like whenever Russia reminds us of all the things that didn't happen since 88 or 89 or 90 or whatever, 91 that the USSR officially collapsed. It's just ridiculous. But that's Tucker Carlson. And that's what people in the middle and the left of United States believe as well, because they feel that the United States has made a lot of missteps. And so when you have somebody pointing those things out, it really lands again on easy, on ready ears. So we have a situation where different info spaces are blowing up for different reasons. But either way, we're looking to a very unstable situation. That's what Donald Trump represents, is chaos. And it's just a chaos for different reasons to different publics. But nonetheless, it's one big chaos that is not good for Israel. It's not good for anybody.
U.S. Special Representative Keith Kellogg arrived in Belarus and met with the country's self-proclaimed President Alexander Lukashenko. This was reported by the Belarusian state news agency Belta on Saturday. The agenda of Lukashenko and Kellogg's talks included international issues and the overall situation in the world, regional issues and Belarusian-American relations, Belta reports. We see this video of the meeting published by Belta and shows like Lukashenko hugging Kellogg. I remember how Steve Witkoff hugged with Russian dictator and terrorist number one in the world, Putin. So we see that Keith Kellogg is like Steve Witkoff in this case. Who doesn't know him? He is the most media-friendly person these days, the Belarusian leader said. Later, during the talks, Lukashenko noted that Kellogg made a lot of noise in the world with his arrival, to which Kellogg laughed. A lot of jokes. In turn, Kellogg thanked for the hospitality and the meeting. We live in a very dangerous time when the crisis we face can sharply escalate, grow, if we are not wise and fair, he said. What is the main goal of this visit?
Probably to set up a new meeting for Donald Trump with another dictator. Because that seems to be the one thing that Donald Trump is mostly interested in, is being next to, surrounding himself with strong men. Interesting, not even strong women, but I don't know. I'm waiting for a woman dictator, but maybe it's just a man thing. So dictator, whatever. Kellogg is also doing a very dangerous thing, which is continuously legitimizing dictators, because now, whether we're talking about American policy here, more than Kellogg, far more than Kellogg, whether we have Putin being discussed as a possible mediator in any negotiations between anybody, unless we're talking like Kadyrov and somebody else on the inside of, and Hiruk, and then like their own battles that they're trying to sort out. Anywhere else, Putin, Lukashenko, bringing them back into spotlight and saying this is a leader is really discrediting the word leader, because those are not leaders. Those are dictators. They are tyrants. They are not allowing for freedom of expression, and they're definitely not allowing for ability to people to change their leadership. And how can we communicate with a country where a leader has been considered illegitimate since 2020 by a world community? Is not beyond me, because this is every day in Trump world. But we at the same time can never normalize this, because this is wrong. Keith Kellogg should not be speaking to Lukashenko. This is embarrassing all of us as Americans that this is happening while there's people who are in prison in Belarus for protesting Lukashenko in 2020 and since then, because he can't stand opposition, because Lukashenko is future of Trump. But one of possible scenarios, because he lost election, he refused to leave, he surrounded himself with Russian guns, and Belarusians have been far too timid to protest in a way that Ukrainians have, because Ukrainians set up Maidan, which is people come out and they refuse to leave. Simple enough. Belarusians have become famous in their 2020 protests because they would take off their slippers before getting on a bench to protest. That's how caring these people are. I mean, it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's admirable. But it doesn't do enough to change a dictator who is willing to resort to violence, who is willing to resort to foreign interference in order to maintain his hold on power. So that's one of possible scenarios for the United States, and one of the things that Belarusians and Ukrainians frequently remind me, because they say, without Maidan, you're not going to solve this problem. The problem that you have in the United States is not going to be solved without a big protest like Maidan. And we in the United States, I feel like, would like to get this problem solved without resorting to Maidan. And that is the challenge where we are, because we would like to be not Belarusians, because United States population is very heavily armed, and it's just impossible to believe that we're going to be as nice and peaceful as people of Belarus were. But at the same time, we're not at the level of desperation that Ukrainian people were when they decided that this is enough. And we're not at that level of this is enough, apparently, where we're not willing, we're willing to come out 10 million plus on city streets, 2,000 protests all over the United States. I was in one in Milwaukee, and that's beautiful, but it's not enough. It's not Maidan, and Donald Trump is not going to change his policy because of it. But this is what society needs. This is what culture needs in order to grow, to mature, to develop to a state where we're going to be, in a way, a little bit less naive and less, less Americans that people used to know, and more Americans of the future, more people that need to take care of business at home, and as well as being responsible for what is happening on this planet. We do need to take care of business at home, and I think that American way is going to be different than Ukrainian or Belarus way, but it is going to be no less easy and potentially even more violent.
And we have 2 minutes. Yuri, Russian dictator Putin made a big show for Donald Trump, according to assessing of our President Vladimir Zelensky. In such way, he commented Putin's speech on their Petersburg International, but there were no big leaders from whole the world there, only like daughters of Vladimir Putin. And Zelensky mentions that all these statements about new 100,000 capitulative ultimatums for Ukraine, it's all for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump and everybody in the world should take pressure against Russian dictator. But does Donald Trump understand that Putin only wants to prolong his war, and maybe he likes this show and doesn't want to make any pressure against Putin?
Well, Putin is in a difficult position, as Financial Times, I believe, has just reported. Russia is on the verge of recession, and he announced that is impossible, that cannot happen. Well, I mean, what's the one solution that Russia has to avoiding recession? War. So I think that those kinds of things are going to be in the country's future, and that's it used to be, I think, oil, gas, lumber, women, children that Russia was exporting, but now it's just war. Just, violence and cannon fodder. So that's one thing that Putin is dealing with. The fact that there was one seat, I'm sure, saved at that presentation for Donald Trump, but he didn't come, even though he wanted to, like he wanted to be at May 9th, I'm sure. Because Donald Trump there's one problem in his life. He can't seem to meet Vladimir Putin. They met in 2018, and since then, right now, especially since he's been president, because we don't know what happened when he was not president, but since he's become president, he seems to really want to meet Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin appears in St. Petersburg, appears here. He calls Donald Trump all the time, because Donald Trump seems to be really good about doing things that somebody just spoken to his ear about. So Trump seems to be calling allies or calling Ukraine right after he spoke to Putin, because it's still fresh in there before it kind of disintegrates and everything. I think that, the recession and the pandering, I think pandering is an important part of dealing with Donald Trump. And of course, Vladimir Putin understands this both by using Donald Trump's name not in vain, but when praising anything, and Donald Trump, great, oh, he's wonderful. And at the same time, when criticizing, never saying Donald Trump, saying him, we know, making all sorts of references. Peskov is good at this as well, but not actually naming him by name. It's like a horror show where you can't say the character's name 3 times into the mirror, he'll come out and respond with a tweet. The horrible tweets. So I think that Putin is in a bad situation, and he knows how to pander to Trump. But I think Ukraine should use this as well. I think that Ukraine should announce that every time a Russian rocket strikes Ukraine, it has hit another Trump building. Because, that's how Trump seems to respond. Of course, I can see, to end our conversation, I can see another building in Moscow with a Trump name on it. Currently, it says Lenin on the mausoleum, but I can easily see where it would say Trump, because who's done more for the state of Russia?
Really, it's a pity, but it's a real fact. Yuri, thank you very much for this conversation, for your opinion and your position. See you next week. Take care.
Take care.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English. Irina Uzlova, my name. Please, guys, subscribe to our YouTube channels and see you later.